Michigan-born icon. Magic Johnson is widely regarded as one of the greatest basketball players of all time. But did you know that his biggest fortune didn't come from basketball? Instead, it came from life insurance? Yeah, you heard that right. Magic earned around $40 million during his NBA career, then somehow turned that into an empire worth roughly $1.6 billion. But we're saving his crazy story for number one, because before we get there, we have 7 other wealthy Michigan dynasties that have some equally wild stories to tell. You'll meet a janitor who turned a mop into a global staffing empire, a failed steakhouse owner whose company now makes roughly 1 out of every 10 car seats in North America, and a retired Detroit Piston who quietly built a $3 billion manufacturing machine. Let's count them down. Number 8. The Barfield family. We are starting with a man who once cleaned the University of Michigan for a living, which makes what happened next unbelievably satisfying. John Barfield came to Ypsilanti, served in the army, came home, and took a custodial job at the university. Nothing about that sentence screams future corporate dynasty. It screams, please remember to empty the trash on the 3rd floor. But John was paying attention. In the 1950s, he and his wife Betty started a cleaning company from their home. The idea was painfully simple. If John already knew how commercial buildings were cleaned, why not own the company sending people in to do it? That operation eventually employed hundreds before the Barfields sold it, and John moved into staffing and technical services. That became Bartech. By its 2015 sale, the company was managing more than 30,000 workers and consultants and overseeing more than $3.5 billion in client staffing spend. The buyer paid about $120 million, although private equity already held a majority stake. Still, the scale is ridiculous when the starting point was a man carrying keys and cleaning supplies through university hallways. And this is where the family part matters. His sons entered the business, the next generation took leadership roles, and the Barfield name moved from janitorial work into boardrooms and philanthropy. Sometimes the first asset is not money. It is knowing an overlooked system because you were once the person doing the overlooked job. And Barfield understood another quiet advantage. Corporations will always need people, even when the job titles change. He was not betting on one product. He was building the toll booth between giant companies and the workers they needed. The Barfields figured out the people side of corporate America. Our next family found money in something even less glamorous: the chemicals nobody wants to think about after a car gets painted. Number 7. The Richardson family. Leon Richardson built a business around a rule so blunt it sounds like something somebody wrote on a factory wall with a marker. Go where paint is applied, or where the finished product has wheels. That is basically the logic behind Chemico Group, the Southfield company Richardson started in 1989. Chemico manages and distributes industrial chemicals. The complicated stuff factories need to receive, track, use, recycle, and dispose of without turning the plant into an environmental horror story. It is not glamorous. Nobody has ever posted an Instagram carousel titled, "My Dream Chemical Lifecycle Management Setup." And that is exactly why it is interesting. Because boring, difficult, regulated work is where competitors tend to disappear. Richardson started with 1 employee and built Chemico into one of the largest minority-owned chemical management and distribution firms in the country. The company now says it has more than 450 employees across 30 states and 4 countries, with annual sales above $175 million. General Motors has named it Supplier of the Year 7 times. It also expanded beyond automotive into aerospace and biopharmaceutical work, which is the grown-up version of not putting all your eggs in one basket. Think about the model: cars, aircraft, regulated plants. Chemico gets paid to make sure the chemical side never becomes chaos. The product is not the shiny thing coming off the line. It is keeping the invisible mess under control. Richardson also pushed tens of millions of dollars back through minority-owned suppliers. One contract creates payroll, payroll creates expertise, and expertise creates another supplier. That is how one company's success starts behaving like an ecosystem. Michigan has plenty of fortunes attached to things people can see. Leon Richardson made his by mastering the invisible mess behind them, and that is a recurring theme on this list. The sexiest business is rarely the safest one. Nobody lines up overnight for chemical management, which is probably why the margins are not being fought over by influencers. Next up, let's look at a family that actually fought the federal government for the right to move what those factories make. And somehow, a truck carrying beer helped change American trucking law. Speaking of what it takes to keep pushing when the system is built to stop you, a lot of it comes down to how the brain performs when it matters. That's the idea behind an audio series called the Genius Switch. It's based on the neuroscience of the flow state, that mode where focus and creativity click at the same time. And the whole routine is just listening with headphones a few minutes a day. It's a one-time $39, less than a single online course, and it's backed by a 90-day money-back guarantee, so you can test it on yourself with nothing to lose. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to Michigan, and the man who started with almost nothing on 4 wheels. Number 6. The James family. John A. James did not begin with a logistics network. He began with a used truck, an uncle, and a beer route from Milwaukee to Detroit. That is it. 2 men and a truck. The problem was that federal trucking rules at the time could make entering the business feel less like starting a company and more like applying for permission to breathe. James could haul certain goods on certain routes, but established carriers fought his attempts to expand. He spent years challenging the rules that kept newcomers, especially black operators, out of lucrative interstate freight. Eventually, his fight became part of the broader push toward trucking deregulation. After the Motor Carrier Act of 1980 passed, President Jimmy Carter even wrote James a letter thanking him for his efforts. That is a wild little detail. Imagine starting with 1 truck and ending up with correspondence from the president because your licensing headache helped change the rules of an entire industry. James' group kept growing. From less than $50,000 in early annual sales, it became by the mid-1990s the highest volume truckload carrier for a major automaker, hauling more than 2,000 truckloads a week. The family then expanded into logistics, warehousing, technology, and supply chain services. Then the succession story gets interesting. John A. James did not build a company his children had to sell because nobody knew what to do with it. His sons moved into leadership. Lauren James became a key operator inside the family enterprise, while John E. James went from West Point and Army service into business leadership and eventually into the United States House of Representatives. So one branch worries about whether parts reach an assembly line on time while another operates in Congress. Family group chats must be exhausting. And the original business is brutally durable. Cars need parts, parts need warehouses, and in just-in-time manufacturing, a late truck can cost far more than a late delivery apology. John James did not just buy a truck. He forced open a lane, then taught the next generation how to keep traffic moving through it. The truck was the visible asset. The real asset was authority. Permission to operate across markets competitors had spent years keeping closed. Once that door opened, the family had something much harder to copy than a vehicle. The James family turned 1 truck into infrastructure. Our next family started with McDonald's, and somehow ended up supplying companies like Boeing, Ford, GM, and Mercedes-Benz. Yes, the cheeseburger to aerospace pipeline is real. Number 5. The Pickard family. Dr. William Pickard's entrepreneurial career began in 1971 as a McDonald's franchisee in Detroit. That alone would have been a respectable story. Own restaurants, build cash flow, maybe buy a few more, retire comfortably. Pickard apparently looked at comfortably and decided it sounded boring. Over the next several decades, he built an industrial portfolio that had almost nothing to do with French fries. In 1989, he founded what became Global Automotive Alliance, or GAA, a manufacturing and supply chain business that went on to generate more than $5 billion in cumulative sales. Its customer list stretched from Detroit automakers to Mercedes-Benz and Boeing, along with major corporations well outside the auto business. Just pause on the visual there. A man whose business journey starts under the Golden Arches eventually has companies serving aerospace and global manufacturing. The career path looks like somebody kept pressing randomize, and somehow every result made money. Pickard also became a co-managing partner in MGM Grand Detroit, held interest in black media, and backed major educational and cultural institutions. He was not building one company. He was assembling a platform across manufacturing, hospitality, media, and civic life. That platform survived his death in 2024. The McDonald's origin also explains the strategy: reliable operating cash on one side, capital-hungry industrial businesses on the other. Pickard was building a machine, not betting on one lucky product. And he was unusually deliberate about teaching ownership. Pickard spent years mentoring younger black entrepreneurs and treating access to capital and contracts as something that should be passed down, not guarded like a family recipe. The result is one of those Michigan stories where the famous piece is not actually the biggest piece. The McDonald's connection gets your attention. The billions in industrial sales are what make you stay. And it is a useful reminder that a restaurant can be more than the final business. Sometimes it is the cash-generating first rung of a much taller ladder. Pickard turned fast food into a launch pad for industrial power. Our next family went the other direction. They made billions selling cars, then used the money to start buying and rebuilding Detroit itself. Number 4. The Jackson family. Gregory Jackson learned the car business from the inside, came through General Motors' minority dealer training program, and in 1993 founded Prestige Automotive. Then he did what Detroit understands better than almost any city in America. He scaled. At its peak, Prestige became one of America's largest black-owned dealership groups. In 2005, reported sales reached about $1.67 billion. Billion. From selling cars. But the part that makes the Jackson family more interesting today is what happened after dealerships stopped being the whole story. Gregory and his daughter, Annika Jackson Odigbo, moved deeper into real estate through Jackson Asset Management. And their most symbolic project could not be more Detroit if it tried. They became part of the team redeveloping Fisher Body Plant 21, a 600,000-square-foot former auto factory that sat abandoned for decades near one of the city's busiest highway interchanges. The plan is to turn that industrial shell into hundreds of apartments plus retail and other commercial space. The development website now markets the project for availability in 2027, with the total development described at roughly $140 million. The family built wealth selling automobiles and is now helping turn a factory that once produced automobile bodies into housing. That is not diversification. That is Detroit, eating its own history and serving it back as real estate. The city has called Fisher 21 the largest African-American-led development deal in Detroit history, and officially identified Gregory and Annika as the father-daughter team behind Jackson Asset Management. That succession matters. Dealerships create operating cash, property can keep appreciating and producing rent. The product changes from cars to concrete, but the game stays the same. Control useful assets. And if Fisher 21 works the way the developers envision, the family will have helped convert one of Detroit's most visible symbols of abandonment into a place where hundreds of people actually live. The project's own site now points to 2027 availability, so this is not a finished victory lap yet. It is a live bet, which honestly makes it more interesting. The Jacksons went from moving cars off lots to moving Detroit buildings back into economic life. Our next family makes the thing you are physically sitting on while driving those cars. And its origin story begins with a steakhouse failure. Number 3. The Hall family. Ronald Hall Sr. once owned Bonanza Steakhouses in Detroit. They failed. Not, we had a rough quarter failed. Failed. For a lot of entrepreneurs, that is where the motivational speech ends and the bankruptcy lawyer enters. Hall treated it like a very expensive course correction. He moved into automotive supply and eventually helped build Bridgewater Interiors, a Detroit-based manufacturer of complete automotive seating systems. Today, Bridgewater operates 4 plants, employs about 2,400 people, and reports annual revenue just over $2 billion. It produces around 3,500 seating systems every single day. Industry sources have estimated that its output represents roughly 1 in every 10 automotive seating systems assembled in North America. 1 in 10. So there is a decent chance somebody watching has spent years sitting on a Hall family product without knowing the name. That is industrial stealth wealth in its purest form. And timing matters. Automotive seats arrive in just-in-time sequence, The wrong seat in the wrong order can become a production problem immediately. Bridgewater also became known for landing enormous minority supplier contracts. The company says it received the largest contracts ever awarded to a minority business enterprise by General Motors, Ford, and Honda during different periods of its growth. It now spends more than $250 million a year with minority-owned suppliers of its own. That is one of my favorite details here. The Halls did not climb into the supply chain and pull the ladder up. $250 million of purchasing power pushed through other minority businesses is how private success starts behaving like infrastructure. The succession was equally deliberate. Ronald Hall Jr. took over as president and CEO, and the family remains represented inside plant leadership as well. His background, West Point, Army service, law, is almost comically overqualified for somebody whose day job includes making sure thousands of car seats arrive in perfect sequence. A failed steakhouse became a $2 billion seating company. That sentence alone should be illegal to put on a resume. And notice the upgrade in business quality. Restaurants hope customers walk in. An automotive supplier with a long-term production program knows exactly which factory needs exactly how many seats. Failure pushed the family toward a business with much stickier demand. The Halls built the seats. Number 2 built entire pieces of the car, after winning 2 NBA championships first, just to warm up. Number 2. The Vinnie Johnson Empire. If you know Detroit basketball, you know Vinnie Johnson as the microwave, the guard who could come off the bench cold and start scoring before the other team had finished wondering who was supposed to defend him. He won back-to-back championships with the Pistons in 1989 and 1990. That would be the peak of most lives. Vinnie apparently treated it as networking. After basketball, Johnson founded Piston Automotive in the mid-1990s with the explicit goal of creating jobs and economic opportunity in Detroit. The company grew into Piston Group, a private manufacturing platform with automotive interiors, assembly, thermal systems, and other industrial operations. Current company figures put annual revenue around $3 billion, with more than 10,000 employees across its businesses. Here is the part that matters for ownership. Court records in a long-running certification dispute documented that Johnson owned and controlled 100% of Piston Group and several key subsidiaries, along with a controlling interest in another operation. This is not one of those celebrity businesses where the famous person owns 12% and shows up for the ribbon cutting. The manufacturing machine is his. The scale is startling. Piston Group supplies major automakers, operates across multiple states and Mexico, and Michigan officials have described it as the nation's largest African-American-owned automotive supplier. Johnson built himself into the part of Detroit most basketball fans never see. Then comes the full-circle detail that almost feels scripted. In 2026, Piston Automotive announced plans to operate from a General Motors-owned facility on the former site of the Palace of Auburn Hills, the arena where Johnson won those championships with the Pistons. Read that again slowly. He used to score points on that ground. Now his company is going to manufacture automotive products there. That is not a career pivot. That is taking your old highlight reel and turning the property underneath it into an industrial asset. It also captures why Vinnie sits this high. Plenty of retired athletes invest in businesses. Very few end up owning a manufacturing platform large enough that courts, automakers, and state officials have to debate its corporate structure and supplier status. Vinnie also keeps a low profile compared with modern athlete entrepreneurs. No endless content about CEO mornings. The proof is in purchase orders and factories. Piston Group went from roughly $1 million in its early period to billions in annual revenue. Basketball gave Johnson a name. Manufacturing created the weight. So why is he not number 1? Because the man above him took a very different path and crossed a line that almost nobody from professional sports ever crosses. Forbes now values him at about $1.6 billion. And the weirdest part is that basketball did not make him a billionaire. Life insurance did. Number 1. The Magic Johnson family. Here he is. Irvin Magic Johnson. And before anybody says, wait, does a guy who lives in Los Angeles really belong at number 1 on a Michigan list? Look at the roots. Johnson was raised in Lansing as one of 10 children. His father worked at General Motors. His mother was a school custodian. He starred at Everett High, stayed close to home at Michigan State, and in 1979 helped deliver the Spartans their first NCAA basketball championship. Michigan built the entire first act. Now, the money, because this is where the story takes a hard left. Forbes currently estimates Johnson's net worth at about $1.6 billion. He earned roughly $40 million total as an NBA player. $40 million is obviously enormous money, but compared with a $1.6 billion fortune, it is the appetizer. His real wealth came from doing deals after basketball. He also made spectacular mistakes. Nike once offered stock and royalties. Johnson chose guaranteed Converse money. He later sold his Lakers stake before team values went berserk. Most people would spend life emotionally refreshing a calculator. Magic kept investing. He bought into Pepsi bottling and then movie theaters in underserved black neighborhoods. At one Los Angeles location, he met with representatives of the Crips and Bloods and helped make the theater neutral territory. It later became one of the country's strongest grossing venues. Then came a 50-50 Starbucks venture that grew past 100 stores. Johnson localized the food, music, and atmosphere because, shocking concept, customers spend more when a business acts like it knows them. He later sold those stores back for a reported $75 million profit. He moved into real estate, healthcare, and sports ownership, including a $50 million check to join the Dodgers group. But the biggest asset in the portfolio is almost aggressively unsexy: life insurance. In 2015, Johnson acquired a 60% stake in Equitrust. Forbes now says the insurer's assets under management have grown from about $16 billion when he took over to roughly $33 billion. That majority stake makes up the largest share of his fortune. A kid nicknamed Magic because he could pass a basketball is a billionaire largely because he owns most of an insurance company in Iowa. If you pitched that movie, a producer would tell you the third act needs work. But that is exactly the point. Johnson stopped asking what looked impressive and started asking what scaled. A movie theater can fill one neighborhood. Insurance premiums can compound across millions of policies. Michigan never completely disappeared either. Johnson has repeatedly returned to support Lansing Promise, with Magic Johnson Enterprises listed among its partners, using his hometown story to push students toward college and career training. That is why he is the payoff. Vinny may own the larger Michigan operating company, but if you want the clearest publicly documented black family fortune with Michigan roots, Magic is the only one here with a Forbes figure comfortably above $1 billion. And notice how he got there. Not through modern NBA salaries or one miracle stock, but through boring, scalable businesses, bottling, theaters, coffee, healthcare, insurance, and learning how ownership works. Cookie Johnson has shared the public and philanthropic side of that journey for decades, while their children have built careers in media, fashion, and entertainment. Whatever succession eventually looks like, the asset base is worlds away from the one Irvin Johnson Sr. could have imagined at GM. One generation clocks in at the plant, another learns to buy pieces of the system around it. From a GM worker's household in Lansing to a $1.6 billion fortune built mostly outside basketball. That is the richest publicly documented black family story on our Michigan list. And those are 8 black families and business dynasties holding serious pieces of Michigan's economy. Which story got you? The Hall comeback? Vinny building on the old Palace site? Or Magic turning $40 million in basketball earnings into a $1.6 billion fortune? Drop your pick below, hit like if one surprised you, and don't forget to subscribe to Black Status. We will see you in the next one.